If you have been to the grocery store in the last few weeks, you might have noticed that pretty much everything is pink and it has ribbons on it, which must mean that it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And every October when Breast Cancer Awareness Month comes around, there's this big push for we need more money for breast cancer research, which is fair because about 40,000 women die of breast cancer every year in the United States. So it's definitely a big deal. However, I have noticed that these, pushes for more research dollars, they are for diagnosis and treatment of breast cancer. And I was thinking, well, why don't we put more research dollars into determining what causes breast cancer? And then I looked into it, and I realized that research has kind of already been done. And that's really important because if you know the cause, then there's a really good chance that you can prevent breast cancer from happening in the first place. So let's determine what causes breast cancer. One of the strongest risk factors for breast cancer is total lifetime hormone exposure. So the more hormones, specifically sex hormones, that you are exposed to over the course of your lifetime, the higher your risk of developing breast cancer. So higher hormones for a longer time equals a higher risk. Factors that can increase your hormone exposure are early menses. So like the younger you are when you start your period, the longer you will be exposed to those sex hormones. And later menopause. So the longer you go before you hit menopause, the more hormones you're going to be exposed to as well. Back even like 100 years ago, girls usually started their period when they were 15, 16, or 17 years old. And then women usually entered menopause in their early 40s. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for girls to start their period when they're like 9, which just breaks my heart because a 9-year-old should never have to deal with that. And then a lot of women don't go into full-on menopause until they're in their late 40s or early 50s. So women nowadays can have like 5, 10, 15 more years where they're doing their reproductive cycles and they're exposed to higher amounts of sex hormones, which can drastically increase breast cancer risk. In addition to high levels of sex hormones, high levels of growth hormones like insulin-like growth factor 1 are associated with higher rates of breast cancer as well. That's because growth hormones like IGF-1 increase the frequency that cells divide, and the more cellular division, the more chance of cells turning cancerous. And then those growth hormones also decrease the amount of apoptosis or cell death. And that's something that you want to happen if you have a damaged or an old cell, because those are the cells that are at risk for turning into cancer. So once you're full grown, out of your childhood years, you want your growth hormone levels to be pretty nice and low so that you have a lower risk of cancer and many other diseases. There are also certain types of bacteria in our intestines that are particularly prone to releasing sex hormones that have been bound and excreted into the intestines, so we can just poop them out and get rid of them because we don't need any more. But those bacteria tend to release those sex hormones where they can then be absorbed back into the bloodstream, where they will raise our total sex hormone levels. All of these hormonal risk factors that I just talked about have one common cause, and that's the standard Western diet. A standard Western diet is high in dietary fat, and we know for a fact that high dietary fat increases sex hormone levels. Standard Western diet is also high in animal proteins, which is just flat out known to increase growth hormone levels in humans. It's just an unquestionable fact. And dietary patterns that are high in fat and protein, like the standard Western diet, are known to promote the growth of those specific types of bacteria that are known for releasing sex hormones. And of course, animal products like meat and dairy naturally contain 100% natural mammalian sex hormones. Most lactating cows are also pregnant at the same time, so you are getting a really good dose of sex hormones when you eat or drink those animals. The next factor that is known to contribute to breast cancer risk is carcinogen exposure. One of the primary carcinogens that's associated with breast cancer and many other types of cancers are heterocyclic amines. HCAs are formed when flesh foods, so like meat, is exposed to heat. And the more heat that it's exposed to and for a longer time, the more HCAs are going to be produced. So a food that I can think of that would be pretty high in heterocyclic amines is fried chicken. A high intake of heterocyclic amines can actually predict the risk of precancerous changes to breast tissue in women, and I think that's a good enough reason to avoid them. And then, of course, another potent human carcinogen identified by the World Health Organization a few years ago are processed meats. So those would be things like deli slices. And of course, the WHO also identified red meat as a probable human carcinogen, so I'm all for avoiding that too. The WHO also released a report a few years ago that definitively identified alcohol as a human breast tissue carcinogen. I wonder how many people have wine, cheese, and salami in a night. And then, of course, a source of carcinogens that really shouldn't be ignored are environmental toxins. So pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, plastics, cleaners, body care products, and of course all the other things that we touch 1,001 times a day that contain carcinogenic chemicals that we don't even think about. Another well-known risk factor for breast cancer is high cholesterol. High LDL cholesterol appears to be an especially high risk factor. So cholesterol is a really vital nutrient for cancer cells. They use the cholesterol to build their cell walls. So a rapidly dividing tumor, also known as an aggressive tumor, will need a lot of cholesterol to support its rapid growth. So much so that one of the warning signs of an aggressive, fast-growing tumor is that the person's cholesterol levels will just plummet. The next factor that's been identified as a cause or a risk factor for breast cancer is chronic low-grade acidosis. This would be indicated by low bicarb levels on a blood test. And even though this is usually just considered, pretty much standard because a lot of people have it, it doesn't mean that this is something that's healthy or shouldn't be addressed. So chronic acidosis is caused by consuming foods that, when they're metabolized, like when they go through the process of being broken down and used by the body, they produce acidic byproducts. The primary types of foods that do this are essential amino acids, which are particularly rich in animal foods, dietary fat, especially if that fat is being consumed as the predominant source of calories, like in the case of a paleo diet, a keto diet, or any other diet that sends the body into a state of ketosis, where it is producing ketone bodies, which are highly acidic. And then processed foods are well known to be metabolized with acidic byproducts. And those three categories of foods really make me think of a lot of the pink products I've seen in the grocery store recently. And of course, we can't talk about breast cancer risk without addressing genetic factors. I think a real disservice has been done over the last couple of decades as doctors and researchers and the public have really honed in on genes, because in our quest to identify genetic causes for all sorts of diseases, we've really gotten so focused on this idea that if we have the genes, we're doomed. You know, that our genes are our destiny. And if I'm destined to get cancer, there's nothing I can do about it, so I might as well just not even try. Specifically with breast cancer, there's the BRCA1 and 2 genes that have just been talked about so much in the media. And if you have these genes, your risk of breast cancer does go up, but so does your risk of ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, endometrial cancer, colon cancer, and pancreatic cancer. But the thing about genes is that they have to be expressed, and a gene simply existing doesn't mean that it's going to be expressed. Generally speaking, it's lifestyle factors that determine whether or not a certain gene is turned on or activated or expressed. Generally speaking, if cancer is going to develop from a gene, it's going to require the gene to be turned on. And that's going to take something like a lifestyle factor, like the consumption of animal protein or a lot of fat or processed foods, and or carcinogen exposure, and or not enough phytonutrients or not enough of our innate immunity to be able to fight off the cancer once it develops. So when we're talking about cancer, just remember that your genes are not your destiny. And so, given what the research about the causes of breast cancer says, why are organizations dedicated to fighting and beating breast cancer associated with companies that produce products that are known carcinogens? And why do they talk so much about the necessity of mammography screening when it hasn't been proven to be effective at saving women's lives? Could it be because DuPont, a major producer of machines used for mammography, are a major sponsor? Probably. So when these organizations say prevention, what they mean is screening. But I think it's important to keep in mind that screening is not prevention. Screening is diagnosis. And considering that a lot of the breast cancer tumors that show up in women have been growing for 10, 20, 40 plus years, finding the tumor has nothing to do with prevention. Fortunately, there has been lots of research done on real prevention of breast cancer, and all of it centers around lifestyle. So of course, first and foremost, you are what you eat. Remember that intake of plant proteins and plant fats are not associated with increased risk of breast cancer. In fact, they are associated with a decreased risk of breast cancer. Whole plant food diets are also, generally speaking, naturally low in fat, which will help to naturally balance out your hormones at an ideal level. A lot of whole plant foods are also rich in phytoestrogens. And even though phytoestrogens have been demonized in a PR marketing campaign by the meat and dairy industry, remember that non-industry funded scientific research indicates that the more phytoestrogens women ate, the lower their risk of developing cancer, and in women who already had developed breast cancer, the more phytoestrogens they consumed, the longer their survival and the higher their overall survival rates. Those are wonderful. Those are big deals. Like, we want that stuff. We need that stuff. And of course, whole plant foods are naturally rich in other phytonutrients that are known to block carcinogens, neutralize free radicals, and even repair our precious DNA. Certain rock stars like sulforaphane, curcumin, resveratrol, and even just good old plain, vitamins and minerals, they've all been proven protective against cancer in their whole natural form. The supplemental forms don't work. If you're serious about living a lifestyle that's going to reduce your risk of breast cancer, I also think it's a smart idea to pass on the alcohol. I think I've had maybe 3 drinks in the last 7 years. It's totally possible, and it's actually quite pleasant to live without alcohol. There are many other delicious, much healthier beverages in the world, like tea, like 1,000 different types of teas. You'll never get bored. Or kombucha, or fruit water. There are all kinds of awesome mocktails you can make for yourself to drink at night while you're relaxing. Of course, red wine exists, and it does appear that there are some compounds in red wine that could potentially block their carcinogenic effect, but eating grapes is also better, and I'm not up for that risk, so I'm gonna pass. Vigorous exercise is also a well-known habit that can lower your risk of breast cancer. In fact, vigorously exercising for 30 to 60 minutes a day, 5 times a week, has been shown to reduce circulating estrogen levels by 20%. It's very impressive. Sleep is also so important to reducing our cancer risk. Melatonin, the hormone that is responsible for making us feel drowsy at night and keeping us asleep pretty much all night, appears to also repress cancer growth. Studies have shown that women who sleep in absolutely pitch black rooms produce the most melatonin as they sleep, and those women have the lowest risk of developing cancer. These 4 lifestyle habits naturally lower our exposure to carcinogens, optimize our intake of protective phytonutrients and phytoestrogens, naturally balance our hormones at healthy levels, and are known to support our immunity so that our bodies can thrive and heal and protect themselves from cancer. Because cancer happens. We all get cancer all the time. It's how your body responds to it that's really important. All right. I will see you guys at the next meal. Have a very uncharacteristically small bowl for lunch. And have a banjo. Banjo. Touch. Banjo. There's a good boy. It's Levi's air compressor. I don't have gas yet. But speaking of which, here's some beans. So anyway, I ended up having a late breakfast. So I'm gonna have a pretty small lunch so that I don't ruin my appetite for dinner. It's something you should learn about, ruining your appetite. So I have a little bit of kale, and I put sweet chili sauce on that kale. I have some tofu poke that was left over from yesterday, orange sweet potatoes, a little bit of garbanzo beans, some dulse flakes sprinkled on top, and a little bit of avocado hiding in the back. So flavorful, lots of phytonutrients, plenty of phytoestrogens. We're so happy right now. Okay, I'm gonna take this back into my office and have a working lunch, and I will see you guys for dinner. Not wine. Homebrewed kombucha. And then I tell you what, that tiny little lunch, it was like I didn't even eat. It was delicious, but inadequate. So I made myself a little yard fruit platter. Ripe star fruits, bananas from my yard. I'm gonna snack on this while I go figure out what I'm gonna have for dinner. I added some avocado. I have some oil-free hummus, some oil-free curry fries, and then a kale salad right in there. And I dressed that with a little bit of sweet chili sauce. I'm going to enjoy this beautiful, low-fat, phytonutrient-full dinner, and then that will be everything that I ate today. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Questions and comments and topic requests go in the comments section down below. A thumbs up is always appreciated, and feel free to share this with anyone who you think might enjoy the information. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, make better choices for yourself. Nobody's gonna do it for you, and take really, really good care. I will see you guys so very soon. Are you gonna come in the video now?
Can I?
Yeah.
I wanted to show them my food.
Yeah, show. Ooh. That looks nice.
Yeah.
Like your configuration.
Yeah.
With like your moat of potatoes and avocados. I think that was a good move.
It is a good move. Tastes really good too. So good, babe. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now I will say bye. Bye! I wonder if my video is going to get flagged because of this.